All right. Well, today I've got Don Brammeier down in Sarasota, Florida. I guess Naples, Fort Myers, the whole southwest side of Florida as it sits. So, Don, I appreciate your time. Appreciate you being with us and sharing some information today.
Yeah, look forward to our conversation.
Yeah. So, maybe first thing to get us started, as a background, who's Don? What were you doing, and what was going on before you became involved in franchising?
Uh, Actually, I'd spent a little over 20 years in another service industry. It was a corporate role, but we were servicing commercial cooking and refrigeration. So had a large region, a lot of travel, and got on the later end of the age spectrum. And as happens quite frequently in the corporate world, you're kind of on the way out and you just see the writing on the wall. So wasn't ready to retire yet, so I became a franchise consultant and did that, and was finally getting my legs under me when COVID hit. So that kind of blew things up at that point, and along the way, I had placed a couple candidates with Footprints Floors, and as I got to learn more about the business model, I was like, man, I think this is better suited to my interests and skill sets and that. And then I, talked to you obviously a few times before and dug into it a little more. And I saw that you're an owner, and that really got my interest peaked, right? So then it just went from there and went through the discovery process, and it just checked all the boxes for me.
Nice. So back you up a little bit as commercial refrigeration servicing company. What does that mean? And maybe what was your role inside that company?
Yeah, so there was basically three regions, and I had the South Central region, which ran from Indy all the way down to Texas, and then across the Gulf states to Florida here, which is how I ended up in Florida, actually. And then it was just, driving primarily the service operations in the field with the different district managers and a couple hundred service techs, and then getting actively involved in all the different support functions. We had a centralized call center and billing and all that. So I would be active in that as well as handling, customer relations, interacting with our sales team and all the support functions.
Do you have a background in like mechanical engineering or something like that?
Nope. My degree was actually way back when in finance and economics. And back in the early 80s when I graduated, you had to beg for a job practically. And I got one as a financial analyst. I sat in a cubicle for 4 weeks and said, this isn't going to work.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so, from there, I got into retail and then into service. And now here I am. I always wanted to own my own business at some point, but I came up with a multitude of reasons why I couldn't make that commitment, and I
Sure.
said, and so when the decisions, came about later in life, and I said, well, I don't want to be a coulda, woulda, shoulda guy. So I'm going to go ahead and see what happens and roll the dice. And here I am. And I wish I would have done this decades ago.
Oh, I'm sure. And I hear that a lot, but I think sometimes, influences in life can not necessarily interfere, but they can definitely impact whether or not you're ready. We were talking about your kids being 38, 41. Rewind 20 years ago, you might not have had the flexibilities to take a risk, right? And while it's a calculated risk, it's a risk nonetheless. And so sometimes a corporate, golden handcuffs, if you will, can be attractive, right? To provide for the family.
Yeah. But like I said, in a lot of cases it gets you through, but what's it really build for the future? And I felt there was, that personal achievement that, I was missing. And that's what I wanted to give it a whirl. And here I am. So
you're right. Sitting behind a desk, you probably realize right away you want to be out in front of people, interact with some sort of human at some sort of capacity, whether it's logistics or sales or, operations management, et cetera?
Yeah, I like all different parts of the business, not so much the support functions, and I am by no stretch of the imagination. You couldn't even consider me a handyman around the house. Um, but I've been in, service type businesses that are technical in nature. And all right, well, I've done fairly well so far. So you don't really have to have that skill set necessarily. I've always had P&L responsibility, and that's what I like because that gets you involved in a lot of different things. And I like the fact that every day you kind of wake up with a game plan, but hell, it's going to get blown up to a certain extent one way or another, and
Yeah.
that's great. That's what I enjoy. I want something different, and see what you fight the boredom then, right?
The only thing you can count on is change, right? Just when you're planning your day, it changes.
Yeah. And I remember in the corporate world, went through a lot of changes, and I had to help lead that change, and went through read books on change cycles, and we talked about it, had training sessions and everything. Me, I've always liked change. So, this type of business, the business that I've been in before, there was a lot of change constantly going on. And that, to me, that's what keeps things interesting.
I'm jumping ahead here because it's a point I want to get into a little bit more around the business, but I think that probably benefits you in the field, knowing that we're commissioned by homeowners primarily to change and transform their property related to flooring projects, whether it's backsplash or whatever. And one of the most disruptive parts of that is it's change, right? And they want the end result. I always say, like, we love the destination of an international trip. We hate and we are fearful about the journey. And so I think that change and transformation, while a project is going on, it's foreign to our homeowners. And so I think that probably benefits you to be able to say, hey, this change is all right. We're right on track. And what do you mean we're right on track? My house is torn apart. And you're like, this is what it's supposed to look like. And you hired me because I'm the guy that knows, like, this mess is indicating we're going to be done right on track. And they go, if you say so, Don. So I think being comfortable and embracing change probably benefits you. You agree?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, a lot of homeowners, there's some, I call them smart for lack of a better term, but they hired you to do a job, and they let you guys, your crew and yourself, do the job, and they kind of stay back. And then others, they want to know every step of the way, right? So you have to kind of manage that process with people, because otherwise, what the heck are you doing there? Why didn't they just take over the project themselves? So yeah, it's sometimes a challenge, but not usually. Most people are responsive if you handle them in the right way.
Yeah, every once in a while I remind my team, I say, please keep in mind that, like, we exist because the homeowner has a want and they don't know, and the crew has a skill set, but they don't know how to articulate to the homeowner. And so what you just pointed out is sometimes you got to hold the hand of your adult customer that's acting like, a 4-year-old and throwing a temper tantrum because their house is messy or whatever. And you say, I just got to remind you, this is that journey. Remember when we talked about, putting your pictures back on the wall and your TVs and your furniture and cleaning, and I get it. This is disruptive. And so I have to remind my team sometimes that go back to the fundamentals of our business, which is just communication, hopefully proactive communication. Because if you tell them, hey, when you get home from work tonight, it's going to be a mess. If you tell them that before they walk in after a tough day, you're setting yourself up for success. They walk in after a tough day and they go, my God, my house is torn apart. It's like, you're behind the 8 ball in that.
Yeah. You really have to facilitate the process, both with your crew and the homeowners. No doubt about it.
Yeah. So transitioning from refrigeration to becoming a franchise consultant, and you and I both know, a franchise consultant, for those watching this, is a resource to help potential franchise buyers understand the landscape of franchise profile and understand what that candidate might fit and succeed in as it relates to, restaurant, gym, children's art studio, you name it, and really be a non-biased third-party consultant to help inform, educate, confirm, bounce ideas off and help corporate America refugees or whomever, not necessarily fast track in a bad way, but streamline their discovery process and arrive at the right business for them based on budget, skill set, long-term goals, etc. And so in having a touch of all these various brands that you would show your clients, corporate refugees, retirees, other business owners, what do you think about Footprints caught your attention, and why were you intrigued to take it further and actually start talking to me as not a franchise consultant, but as a potential franchise buyer?
All right. So what appealed to me about the business model was, number one, the initial investment, including the working capital. I felt comfortable with that. The fact that I didn't have high fixed expenses, like a building or equipment, employees. I wanted to do something on my own where I didn't have to have that built in. Of course, you're going to have your insurance, you're going to have your marketing and that. But what I liked about the business model is the money's coming in before you're hiring crews and working, and executing.
That's the finance guy in you, right? You like to see the money come in before the money goes out. I like that.
So from a cash flow perspective, it was great, and the margins are good on it. So yeah, it's while it's also, it's more on the need side versus the want side, right? There's a certain amount of that. Yes, no, everybody would like to have nice, beautiful floors or a nice, beautiful bathroom, but what they got is okay, so they'll stick with it. But at some point, usually they're making an investment in their homes, right? And they're going to get a return on that. And that's actually part of my conversations with homeowners, is helping them to work through what the budget is and making sure they get a good return on their investment at the end of the day. Being here in Southwest Florida, most of the people are retired, so they've got disposable income, but they're also looking at, hey, I'm going to be selling this place probably in 10, 20 years, wherever they're at in age. So what does this look like? And it's funny too, because I walk into homes and they've got the list of questions, right? It goes back to going through the process, and they kind of want this, but they're really scared, so they're asking such detailed questions that they've been thinking about for days before I finally show up. And then they're writing the notes down as I'm talking. So it's you're going to have a lot of variety between marketplaces, and that's what I get down here in Southwest Florida. It's a lot of that versus like where you're at in Denver. Somebody up there, or you're gonna have a different mixture. It's going to be a much younger audience, I would assume, on average, middle aged, middle upper income.
Yeah, but I think, it's funny, as you're saying that, you're describing a project going on right across the street from my house right now. And naturally, I introduced my neighbors to the owner out here where I live, Brian Park. And, they're in their 80s. This is their summer home. A lot of folks here go down to Phoenix or, southern climates in the winter. And so they're in their mid 80s. They're in a comfortable spot. And they're having Footprints do a bathroom remodel simply so their friends who are aged as well can utilize their guest bathroom, which currently has a bathtub. So they're putting a walk-in shower in it. And I joke with my neighbors, we have a really good relationship, and we joke about different things. And again, financially, they're in a good spot. And we talked about, like, historically, a bathtub creates higher value in a bathroom than a shower does. And so we talked about that, there's a decreased value in their property by converting to a shower, sort of, right? Depending upon the buyer's wants and so forth. But they're like, we don't care. And so here you've got 80-year-old couple spending, $20,000 on a bathroom remodel simply for their guests that come through as they drive from Phoenix to North Dakota or wherever. So, you got to think the shower is about to get used, I don't know, 20 times a year, and they're going to spend 20 grand on it, and they don't care. Now, that's not our typical customer, right? But we usually don't know that. The only reason I know that is because they're my neighbors. What we hear is what you just said, right? The side of this engagement that Jordan was met with in selling it was they had a laundry list of questions. Donna is awesome, but she's curious, and she definitely has an expectation, being that she was a professional for her entire career. And so her expectation is, that footprints in the team know and understand where their crew's at. They know and understand the rules. They know and understand codes. So like those are that big book of questions, because this is not her first house. This is her, I don't know, their 20th house or whatever. And this is probably the 20th project they've undergone. And so, while Jordan's met with solving those questions, talking with her, the behind the scenes is there are people that will sink 20 grand into a guest bathroom just for their friends to come through. And whether that changes the value of their property or not, it just blows me away, the consumption and the various differences in consumers we meet. I mean, you and I were talking just the other day, I say 20,000, that's a big project. We can both agree, but you told me some numbers on one 2 days ago when we talked about it, share that one with me. And because that's, if we go from a customer that wants to put a guest shower in, now let's talk about your customer that's commissioned you for a similar price and the story around that one.
All right, you're catching me a little off guard. I'm trying to think back which discussion we had. Are you talking about
it was the one with the failed subfloor, or the lack of subfloor prep, the LVP.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The polished concrete. Yeah, those they haven't been in their homes since Milton hit a couple of years ago, and they're just renting right now. They're on Siesta Key. If you're familiar with that, it's supposed to have the #1 beach in the United States. Anyway, they're an older couple. Anyway, they had some polished concrete floors, and they were cracking immediately. Like you walk on them and it would get hairline cracks in it. Well, it turns out they figured out that the self-leveling they did underneath was not done properly. And anyway, as the homeowner related, which was a great analogy, it was like creme brulee, nice hard surface, but underneath was all soft. So anyway, they started to demo that and got about maybe a quarter of the way and just threw their hands up and walked out, and left the homeowner. So they had a general contractor, and then his crew that did this work left. So they're in a legal battle, and it's just been sitting there going nowhere, going very slowly again. So anyway, the homeowner reached out to us, and my crew had done installed some stairs there, and we kind of was seeing this going on as it progressed. And we took some moisture meetings and helped them try to figure it out. But anyway, roundabout stories, I went back out there last week, talked to my crew lead, who was already familiar with the situation. We put together what it was going to take to get it done. Crew feels comfortable with it. Homeowner's comfortable with it. We gave them a fair price, and we're starting today, actually, delivering the materials, and that it's a big project. I mean, typically it's about 1,500 square feet of luxury vinyl. But with the amount of demo work we've got to do, and then the leveling in that to properly prepare the floor, I mean, you've got a job that went from maybe $5,000 to $6,000. It's now $20,000, a little bit more.
Wow.
But you know what? They are so excited because once this floor gets in, they're going to be in their house probably within a month. And they've been out for a couple of years. So, hey, we make some good money on it. We also help some people out, right? So it's kind of that reward. If you're going to be in a service business, if you're going to be successful, you have to have a desire to want to make people happy and take care of their needs, right? So you kind of get the best of both worlds here. That's the goal, and it looks like it's going to happen. So we just got to execute. But
Yeah.
I look at it as opportunities, right? And that's what it's all about. And they're very nice people. They're not going to be difficult to work with and try to manage us through the process.
Yeah, and I got a feeling that probably the attitude you're getting out of them is maybe somewhat influenced by the attitude you're giving them, right? Which is professional, which is not having necessarily all the answers just because you feel like you need to answer it, but showing them that you'll revert to industry standards, and you'll revert to, like, you pulled out a moisture meter and you did some testing, and you did the little things behind the scenes that, while the crews can build really nice floors, they sometimes don't look at the importance around the why. Like, why doesn't the self-leveling concrete work in this scenario? Maybe moisture was too high, or who knows. And so you put together the time to say, hey, let's get to the core of this, and they trust you, right? And they feel confident and comfortable, not because you're the best flooring guy, but because you're not going to cut corners, and they can see right away you're pledged to doing it right and following standards.
Yeah, I think it's people are fine if you don't know for sure, and I let people know right up front. In this case, I was like, well, I've got to talk to some people first and make sure this is all going to work, and how are we going to do it exactly? We've got to re-pour all the self-leveling that we're pulling up, and in some cases, it's not getting technical. It's 3 inches deep. So
whoa,
I don't want the same thing happening to us. Then I own the project. So we want to do it right. So we're doing some things and we feel comfortable with it. And it's kind of a learning process along the way. So a little bit of a challenge, but it's fun. So, that's what I like about this business is, a lot of people like luxury vinyl in this part of the world, with the sand and the water and everything, the moisture, it's just durable and easy. So I get a lot of that. And a lot of it, it can tend to be a little bit cookie cutter. But you get these opportunities. We also do a lot of tile work and so that's a little bit unique. And then, you never know what's going to fall out of the sky, I guess. And that's what's neat because, a lot of our jobs are what, 5,000 or 6,000. I got one I just turned in 3 weeks ago for over $350,000.
Whoa.
So it's a new build. On CS the key, one of these tech guys that's building whatever number of houses he's got, and it's huge. It's like 30,000 square feet on the beach.
Oh my goodness!
And it was a Google lead, and I met with the GC a couple of times and the supervisors, and it's looking good. Hoping to get moving forward here in another month or two, and then start installing hopefully in August, September if everything goes right. Fingers crossed.
Man, that is that's a sizable job. And for those watching that maybe don't know our business entirely, most of our jobs, mine, I'm a labor only guy, right? We come in, we manage labor, we manage the demo, the prep, the installation of the materials that a customer chooses, and they procure it wherever they want. And a big function of that is, number one, for the consumer is they get a reduced price for the total project because we don't upcharge them on the materials, and they can buy labor, but we manage the labor at a very affordable price as well. But maybe more importantly for my business that sometimes people overlook, I don't feel like I'm leaving money on the table. I feel like I'm reducing the time my team has to spend and the expertise they're required to know by not being the product expert, right? We don't have to hold purses, pick colors, talk about tile, talk about sourcing. We don't get yelled at about it not being here because it's still being manufactured in Italy or whatever. And so we're ready to rock and roll when the customer's ready to rock and roll. But ultimately, that's a sizable project where you take, $300,000. It's not uncommon that you could probably see the product being the same amount, right? Another $300,000. So they're putting $600,000 into floors, maybe more.
Yeah, I mean, it's It's all new to me, and I'll be quite frank. Um, part of what helps in this business, it's fun, is you do a lot of networking, right? As
Yeah.
you develop different resources. And so long as you're just always out there kind of talking to people and making yourself known. A few years ago, I had a tile installer move from Hawaii that moved into the area and reached out to me. And he's got 30 years experience. He's done a number of these projects before. I just kind of looked at the blueprints when they sent them over to me and scratched my head and go, I don't have a clue. And when I first walked up to the job, I was like, oh, the floor guys, hey, it's great, And then as I walked up the driveway, I was like, this is out of my league. I don't know how to handle this. And it was funny because I actually told that to the supervisor, construction supervisor. He goes, yeah, we get a lot of that. And I said, but let me check into this some more. And I talked to Brian, one of my installers, and he was, just sorted through his experience and stuff, and he had some resources. And so we put together a package, and he's going to have a different role if this all comes to fruition. And, otherwise I probably wouldn't have been able to get this far in the process for sure. But that's a unique situation. But, I'm sure other owners I know in talking to them, like within our annual conventions and that, there's all kinds of different unique opportunities that come up through. And it's just how much you want to work it and look for them and be open to it. Right. So that's the other part that I find is fun about this business. So, it's great. And, gosh, we got all the support you could ask for. And that was one of the things, when I went out for Discovery Day and met with you and everybody else, I knew I liked the business. I liked the model. I just wanted to meet the people. And my wife and I came out, and it was like, yeah, we knew pretty short order after that day and a half or whatever, we're out there 2 days, that, yeah, this would be the right investment for us. So it's been great ever since. So
That's awesome. A few key points that I'm picking up on there, and it's safe to say that as you signed up, you received training that prepared you to go out and effectively start operating your business to a level that allowed you to continue to rinse and repeat and grow to a confidence of bigger and larger projects, more complex projects, so on and so forth. And here you sit, like 5.5 years in, is that about right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think if your experience is like mine and everyone else that joins this franchise system, one of our biggest questions and concerns is crews. How on earth am I going to find crews? How on earth am I going to command authority on crews to ensure they deliver the craftsmanship that I sold my customer a week ago or 2 weeks ago? How on earth is that going to work? And it's like in my area, crews they're flaky and they don't show up and all. And it's like, we've all experienced the same thing where we come out of training with a little bit of know-how, enough to sell a job, and voila, crews show up. And now fast forward off of, like the polar opposite of, am I going to find crews? Are they capable of producing the work I sell to my customers? You just told me that not only do you have that, you had a crew from Hawaii move out to, Western Florida and reach out to you and say, hey, you got any work? And now you could take that crew and lean on them regarding installation expertise related to a $300,000 project. So it's like there's a fear around crews. And then as we get into the business, we start to realize these are really trade partners that know their craft pretty well. They're a good resource for us. We don't take them as being the experts, but they look at us as, the partner that provides the work, that sets the expectation with customers, that does the front end collection, does the back end collection, does the change orders when, on Tuesday, there's a little bit of a need and we got to ask the customer, to sign a change order so we can agree to the increased scope of work. They appreciate that. And I think a lot of times folks that enter into this from various backgrounds, they don't quite understand that there's a genuine, like, synergistic relationship. There's respect. And I'm describing the good relationships, right? And you and I have both we've gone through and weaned out the ones that didn't quite have the relationship. But I can say in my experience, it hasn't been craftsmanship issues. It's been attitude issues, right? It's that you find a crew that you just can't get along with, and you're like, all right, enough's enough. We don't fire them. We don't have an HR conversation with them. We just don't give them another job next week. And, and whatever the case is, and we continue to upcycle. And so I love that you are now in a place in your business, your confidence, your knowledge level, that you can say, hey, I know enough that I don't know that. I'm going to lean on the resources around me, and we'll put a bid together, and I'd be honored to earn this job at $300,000. That's mind blowing, Don. I got to follow along and watch that one come together.
Yeah, I actually show people, our chat app.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've used our resources, that Footprints provides. It was on KCK, which isn't far from my house, on a multi-million-dollar home refinishing hardwood flooring. Now, understand, I do maybe about 6 of these a year, 7 versus most of the rest of the country, right? I'm either installing floating floors or tile floors in bathrooms. And anyway, they had sand and water in there, and went through the whole process. And this European oak that was put down in the 30s was all warped, and it got it dried out and smoothed out. And so sand and refinish guy at the time, he went in and was working it, but we just couldn't get the finish right. It just was, I don't know how to describe it. Just didn't look right, the finish. And, at the time, Brett Miller was there. I had Brett on a call with the NWFA and doing a video call. And then the household manager and the owner were just standing off to the side. We're talking about it, and they're listening to our conversation. And it was super impressive. And it was a big relief for me, right? Because I was lost. I had no idea. My crew didn't know what to do, exactly what was going on. It turned out that there were so many possible variables that Brett made us aware of, and the homeowner seeing it's from an industry expert right there in their own home, that it gave us a ton of credibility. And my guy kept after it, my crew, and he finally figured it out. I can't say that we figured it out with, on the phone call, but he did the next day, and he did some things differently, and it worked out. But to have those kind of resources, I mean, that's an extreme example. But people, in the industry are willing, especially with Footprints, to really help you be on site. The tile manufacturers, I've got a new one in the area with Weedy trying to get it in. He drove from Orlando to meet me at a Floor and Decor here in Sarasota in the morning, and says, hey, I'll come out and train your crew on our system. They want to partner with us. So that's another great resource, right? And that was one of the things that attracted me to Footprint. And it's one of the things I've always said about, Brian and everybody else is, you guys are always staying ahead of the curve with the support, which I found with a lot of other franchisors. They're either micromanaging your day-to-day, or you go through training. They have somebody out in the field with you for a week or two, and then it's
go get them,
baby. Good luck.
Yeah.
Here I can pretty much pick up a phone, and if I have a real need, somebody's going to call me back or answer when I call. And that's great. Even as the business grows and more owners come on board. So
yeah, I've been so impressed by, to your point, right? I have a lot of touch with other franchise organizations. I've been so impressed by corporate and their commitment to support us, their availability, and then morph that in as we've scaled and grown. Every franchise owner has kind of taken that same pledge of being available for one another. And then now, I'm 7 years in, you're 5.5. I mean, I'm on the phone with the owner, John Dupre, and we're talking about AHF and the products they make, and they're available for us. Like, not only are they available for us related to their product, but you could stand in a living room and call them, and they'll talk you through something else and give you knowledge. And so it's this value of being able to say to your customer, like, hey, I've got a good idea, but I've got more resources than just me and my crew. We're bigger than that. And what we are is an industry, right? We're the flooring industry with standards, and we can tap into those and get immediate responses. And I think largely because of the commitment that Brian has made to the industry and just the friendships and relationships, we're 20 years plus into this as a company, and that gives us kind of the key to walk in the door at the NWFA, and Brett calls you back, right? It's like, and they care about us.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And so when I walk into a home with a homeowner, like you mentioned earlier, right? Hey, here's what I want. I don't know how to get there, and I'm scared of how to get there. Let's face it, all across the country, and you with a lot of trades, you don't know the guy's skill set because you don't know what you don't know, and how to get that project accomplished. And we're walking in as, hey, we're the professional. We may not have all the answers, but we've got all the resources you could ever want. And I share that with homeowners. And you just let them know that you're going to keep track of the crews and you're going to communicate with them. And it's a different level of experience, right? Now, some homeowners, they're looking for price, right? And they're shopping that, and they're not afraid, I guess, to take that risk. But most homeowners don't want to. They want to feel comfortable. So as long as you price competitively, people are willing to pay a little bit more for your services. And at the end of the day, feel good about it. So you just have to deliver on that. That's what I love about Footprints is we've always had those resources available. And you know what? You can take this in a lot of different ways, right? You don't have to just do floors. You don't have to just do bathroom remodels. You can expand a little bit right under the Footprints umbrella. Maybe get into kitchens and that to some extent. And I choose not to, right? I did a little bit last year and got involved in some different things, and we were doing some full-blown remodels and condos and homes, the drywall, the painting, the whole 9 yards, insulation. I've since decided to back out of that and kind of draw some lanes and stay in it, because that's where I feel most comfortable. But I know there's other owners that are getting actively involved in that, and they've got the GC licenses and stuff, and that's great. And man, I got to tell you, if I would have been younger and stuff, I probably would have definitely done that. I know I would have taken it to a whole nother level. And like I said with my handyman comment earlier, I grew up, my brother's real handy with stuff. My dad, he's just, he taught himself how to read schematics. He fixed everything. He built his house practically. And I never had an interest as a kid. And here I am figuring it out that, in my mid 60s that, I kind of enjoy this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's really the whole business aspect and the people aspect that I really, really enjoy at the end of the day. So,
yeah.
So you don't need to have all this technical knowledge. You just have resources to go through and check things out when you just might not seem exactly right to you. And we've got it all available. So you get that comfort level. One of the mistakes I made when I first got into this is I'm so risk adverse. Which sounds kind of strange because, being in the franchise industry, how many people actually go through and invest in a business, right? It's such a small percentage because most people aren't going to take that risk and invest in themselves. And so even within that, I still was hesitant to get into a lot of different types of jobs and stuff. And so I had a slow start, and I look back and I think, man, I should have just paid more attention to that and took it to heart in the training, that I went through. It was like, get out there and just go for it. And you'll ramp up a lot faster, right? So, but anyway, it all works out good. We all take our different paths.
So, So in thinking about that, right, and reflecting on maybe your ramp, whether that was for 6 months or 8 months or whatever, that you kind of maybe interfered with momentum just because your personal hardwiring. Like, what would you go back and tell Don if you were right at that signing point, ready to commit and then get into training? What would you warn yourself of or tell yourself, like, hey, trust me, push through this, and here's why? Is there something some advice you would give yourself on that?
Yeah, so I would have went out and sold the job. Then I would have found the crew to execute it. Okay. Instead of getting the crew and then go find a job. Okay. Because it's so true. The crews don't want you if you don't have nothing for them. Right. They're basically living job to job. So you're not going to keep their interest if you're not getting them jobs. And that's part of the partnership, right? We get them work because they have trouble finding work, communicating, and they do the work, the job, the actual execution. So if you're not delivering, then they got to go with somebody else that is. And I should have been more, I guess, aggressive and just went out there and got the jobs and figured it out along the way. And what's the worst that's going to happen? It's even if the job goes south, what's the worst that's going to happen on that?
Yeah.
It's really not that bad. So yeah, I would have changed it and done that. But anyway, it is what it is. Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, it's intimidating. And I was just talking with a mentor of mine, Mike, and he and I are very much optimistic sales guys. And we were talking about the dynamics of a sales guy that can be a little chaotic and a ops guy that can build protocols for scale. And the sales guy is like, first order business, let's go sell this sucker and then we'll figure it out. And the ops guy is like, let me get it all figured out and then we'll deploy a sales strategy. And it's like, I don't know which one's right, but I've been in the journey long enough to see that you just got to go sell things and create some momentum and then figure it out. And then you made a mistake, and guess what? You threw a little bit of money at it and you fixed it. But how'd you do that? Well, by successfully selling the next one and just continuing on, right? So not willy-nilly, not, at the sake of creating damage or none of that stuff, right? The intentions are genuine, stick to the standards, but like, let's go sell. We got a customer that's excited. They want to transform their property. And then let's figure out how to build it. And guess what? Corporate's there to help us build it. And then rinse and repeat for a few months. And you're like, oh, I guess I do got this, right?
Yeah. I was too much the ops guy. And that was my background initially, was ops. Even though I interacted with all the other functions in the corporate world, I used to call it, I was still at heart an ops guy. And I would sit in some meetings with our corporate account managers, and they're like selling anything. And I'm thinking to myself, time out. Hey, we don't do that.
Right.
What do you mean? You're committing us? No, I can't execute that. So now here I am. It's not a problem. So I would have changed that 5 years ago, when I first started. And I would tell anybody getting into it, have a little more of that sales mentality you've got.
Yeah. Just imagine had you kicked yourself in the butt and started selling then, this $300,000 project at year 5 would probably be $600,000, right, Don?
Hey, it can still turn into $500,000, and it's all labor too, by the way. I'm like you, I don't get into materials. I don't want to deal with the colors and this and that and everything.
Yeah.
So
and a lot of people don't recognize the lack of margin in materials. You think, well, gosh, if there's if there's $300,000 in labor and $300,000 in materials, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And it's like, not really. When you start factoring in time and logistics management and all of that, it takes a whole team. That's why Home Depot and Floor and Decor and all them, they have forklifts and they have delivery solutions and designers. And it's just like, we're not tooled up to capitalize. It's very, it's high volume, low margin stuff in that world. That's why these places have, millions of dollars of inventory sitting on the shelves.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Don, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your perspective on the business, and most importantly, just kind of the willingness to share with others your journey. So keep on doing what you're doing, man.
It's been fun, and heck, this is what we do anyway, right? The owners and everything, we all sharing with each other and learning and supporting. So it's good chatting with you, getting to know you a little better, being another owner, right? And see how you run your business, right? And everything. So that's fun part of this business. So while you're out there doing your own thing, there's a whole big family here there, right? So yeah, it's been a great time, Brian. Thanks.
Yeah, I know it's just about 2 o'clock on the East Coast. So Friday afternoon, go enjoy the weekend, man. Put your toes in the water, grab a cocktail, and enjoy that lifestyle.
Gonna start in an hour.
There you go.
Have a good one.
Take care, Don.
You too. Bye.